name is John Burchell. I'm from over on the north shore of Nova Scotia, born in Truro. The items I brought in today were obtained directly from the original owner, Walter Leopold, from northern Germany, where I worked for the federal government back in the 70s.
Among the Nazis' deadly weapons of war, few were as feared as the U-boat, and deservedly so. These silent killers prowled beneath the waves, searching for victims and striking without warning or mercy. U-boats preyed on the Allied merchant convoys delivering cargo to supply the war effort. Over the course of the Second World War, they torpedoed and sank close to 3,000 ships. But as the Allies developed countermeasures and new tactics, the tide turned. By the end of the war, 2/3 of the U-boat fleet was at the bottom of the ocean, along with 28,000 German submariners. They suffered a 75% casualty rate, the highest of all German forces.
You've brought in a grouping that is pretty spectacular.
It's a grouping of medals, insignia, and edged weapons that belonged to a member of the German War Navy, the Kriegsmarine, in World War II. He wanted to find a home for them. He didn't simply want to sell them on the open market. I had run an ad in a local newspaper where I lived in Germany at the time, the community where he resided. He contacted me, told me he had some things for sale, possibly. And after 3 meetings with him, he felt comfortable letting all of his articles go to myself as a collector, where he knew they would be held together and respected and treated properly.
Wow, I mean, a spectacular grouping. I mean, you've got the officer's sword in its original leather scabbard, which is pristine. The dagger with the original portopee. Over on the side here, you've got U-boat badge, and you've got the Iron Cross second class, the U-boat clasp in bronze. You've got the High Seas Fleet War badge. And over here, you've got the very, very rare U-boat clasp in silver, which was only issued in the last few weeks of the war. Mm-hmm. And you've got the document that goes with that as well.
Yes.
Iron Cross first class, and some other insignia, including his Traditions badge, it looks like, which is exceedingly rare. You've got the summer uniform eagle as well. Just an incredible grouping of material all to one individual.
I think the controversy sometimes that people have, and I think it's, I can understand that, but perhaps mistaken, is the appearance of the national symbol of the National Socialist Party, of the eagle and the swastika, because that signifies, of course, the bad things of the Third Reich.
Unfortunately, before the Third Reich came around, it was a symbol of good luck, of peace, and was turned into, what we know today as the swastika.
Yes, they didn't all have something directly to do with the bad features of the Third Reich and the Nazi regime. Nonetheless, the items that I collect and the other parts of that regime are all history, and history is not to be buried if we're going to learn from it and prevent future occurrences.
Well, the grouping that you brought for us, John, is very pertinent to Halifax, as we said previously, because the gentleman in question was a submariner. In 1939, Hitler actually had a plan to make the German Navy as large as the British Navy. He wanted to match the amount of ships 1 per 1. It's called Plan Z. With the outbreak of war in 1939, that was all shelved because they figured that it would take until 1944 to be able to produce that many ships. They opted instead for submarine warfare and to allocate a lot of the resources to these submarines. Basically, what ended up happening is all these submarines were sort of unleashed on the Atlantic in the beginning of the war. But what happened eventually with the ASDIC, which was radar, the British had figured out a way to tell exactly where those U-boats are, and they could pick them up on radar. And of course, we also had the German codes, which had been broken, and so they were able to figure out where these U-boats were going to be. They weren't as successful. They started sinking a lot of U-boats, and that's really where there was a lot of, loss of life amongst the U-boat crews, because towards the end of the war, a U-boat had almost zero chance of returning from patrol. As you well know, casualty rates in the war were 80–90%, so most of these individuals never survived the war, which makes your grouping all the more impressive. And that you were able to meet the individual and get that history out of them.
Yes.
So most German submariners had 80-90% casualty rate. Towards the end of the war, most U-boats that were going out on patrol were not returning. I think we can take away from John's contribution today the fact that I look at something like that and I always think about the incredible loss of life. They're beautiful artifacts, they're really well made, but at the end of the day, it really speaks to the human tragedy that war is and the loss of life. John, I have to say I would love to be the caretaker of this. I mean, and you've done a fantastic job in keeping it in excellent condition. I have to say, just thought I'd ask, what are your plans? What's your ideas on that, on being the custodian of this?
So it'll stay with me for the time being, respecting the owner's previous request that it be kept together, which of course is what I want to do and what should happen, rather than have going out piecemeal here or there.
It should always be kept intact like that, yeah.
So whether it stays in my family to one of my grandsons, or whether it goes to another collector, it would have to be someone that, like you, that would appreciate keep it together.
Yes, absolutely.
I wouldn't want to see it sold piecemeal on the market. For the moment, it stays as one of my prime pieces of my collection.
What stood out for me most with John is his passion for collecting, and it's people like that protect and preserve our heritage and our history.